Isaac, can you hear me? Dana, I found Isaac Clarke. Repeat, I have him.
Great work, Franco. Be careful. He's been out a long time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Good. Steady. We gotta get you out of this straitjacket. Where am I? Alright, I know you're confused right now. I can explain everything, but you gotta trust me, okay? Listen, you're in terrible danger.
Hi guys, my name is Dale and welcome to D&D Gaming. If this is your first time visiting our channel, we provide honest, in-depth game reviews on a wide range of PC games and review them from the perspective of two experienced gamers. We highly recommend you click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our up-and-coming game reviews. If you find you like this review, remember to give it a thumbs up by hitting that like button. With that said, in for review this time around is survival horror game Dead Space 2. Reviewing the game with me is my brother Dav.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Dead Space 2 is a survival horror game developed by Visceral Games, published by Electronic Arts and released in 2011. The game is the second in a 3-game series following the story of protagonist Isaac Clarke. Dead Space 2 is set on the Sproul space station built in the remains of Saturn's moon Titan in the year 2511. An outbreak of necromorphs, previously dead humans monstrously reanimated by a virus-like organism, has occurred on the space station. You have to fight your way through the space station, battling to survive and ultimately escape. Dead Space 2 received critical acclaim on release in 2011, and the third installment, Dead Space 3, was already far in development by this point and released only 2 years later in 2013. Even though further games in the series had been planned, the series was cancelled by Electronic Arts following the poor sales of Dead Space 3, and the developer Visceral Games was later closed in 2017. However, a remake of Dead Space by Motive Studios was announced in 2021 and is scheduled for release in early 2023. So Dale, what were your first impressions of the game?
Well, I'd heard of the series before, but hadn't played any of them, so I wasn't too sure the type of game it was going to be with this one. I saw from a quick look online that it's basically a survival horror game, and so had an idea of what it might be like from that description, which basically does sum it up pretty well.
Yeah, my first impression of the game was from screenshots and trailer footage. I could see it was a AAA developed survival game with a horror feel set in space, I guess. Just looking at screenshots made me think of BioShock 1 and 2. Even though they're not set in space, it seemed to have a certain look about the game that reminded me of those games. So what were your general thoughts following the playthrough?
Well, I quite quickly realised that the devs went all out with the jump scares in this one, and it has a fast-paced feel to it straight from the opening scene, which actually caught me completely off guard, and I basically died straight away, so not a great start to the game. But once I'd adjusted to that kind of constant feeling of being on edge and realised, what kind of gameplay it was, I kind of knew what they were going for, and it's really done well in that regard. I did enjoy it for the most part, but there was definitely some frustrations that I'll come on to later, and which did really bring the final score down for me.
Yeah, so I thought it was a really cinematic game with a very interesting backstory. A very jump-scary horror game, as Dale pointed out, where it almost always feels like you're just about surviving the onslaught.
So in terms of graphic options, the options are decent enough. At first glance, there seems to be only a few options, but there's also a custom render settings options sub-menu, which then opens up a whole bunch more customization. I'm not sure why they kind of hid it in this way, as some games do, but once you open that up, the options are pretty good for a 2011 game.
Yeah, I haven't got anything more to add to that. I basically just left it on the basic settings, to be honest, and it ran really well. So in terms of graphics and graphics performance, we'll put our PC specs up on screen as usual, but as I say, the game ran really well for me. I had no noticeable issues. The graphics themselves are really good for the age of the game, and it would have been considered very good for the time, I think. I actually think they stand up quite well for a game that's over a decade old.
Yeah, like you say, considering the game's over 10 years old at this point, it still looks perfectly fine on modern hardware, and I expect it looked very good when it was first released. It mostly ran well for me. I did have some strange stuttering issues early on, which I'll mention again later.
So in terms of the player controls, the game controls are typical third-person shooter controls really, with SAD to move around, E key to interact, numbered buttons to cycle through weapons, and left mouse to shoot or attack. There are a few other buttons that relate to special and secondary weapons or actions. One thing to note with the controls is that you can't jump or crouch in the game. There is a gravity jump initiated with the Alt key, but this only refers to areas of the game when you're in zero gravity. With regards to crouch, this is non-existent, so there's no cowering behind cover in this game. Key rebinding is available from the in-game controls menu, and the game does have controller support for PC.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. They're pretty standard controls for this type of game, but as Dav mentioned, it's worth noting that this is one of those games where you can't jump, and it's caught me off guard a few times. The crouching didn't notice as much, but there was definitely a few times I went to jump, like using the space bar, and that ends up just basically crunching the enemies beneath your feet is the movement when you click space. But yeah, overall, I guess it kind of worked with this type of game.
So in terms of the game's story, you play as protagonist Isaac Clarke, an engineer aboard the Sproul space station in the year 2511. In the years leading up to the in-game event, humans have long depleted Earth's resources and began mining resources on other planets and moons, namely Saturn's moon Titan, using giant mining spaceships that break planets apart to attain resources. During the 23rd century, EarthGov researchers find an artifact in the Chicxulub crater on Earth they call the Marker. The Marker emits a persistent electromagnetic field from seemingly no source, which researchers believe could be used to provide limitless energy and solve Earth's ecological crisis. Therefore, duplicates of the Marker are created. Over the centuries, a cult-like religion called Unitology forms around the Marker, with followers believing they will discover the true origin and meaning of human life. However, it's discovered that electromagnetic fields sent by the Marker and its duplicates cause living people to suffer paranoia and hallucinations, while also causing the dead to reanimate, becoming necromorphs, biological monstrosities which rise to attack the living. EarthGov immediately terminates the Marker project and abandons all research stations where the work had been done, covering up their locations. Following the events of the previous game set 3 years earlier, Isaac, having narrowly survived the outbreak of necromorphs aboard the mining ship Ishimura, is captured by EarthGov and confined to an asylum aboard the Sproul space station, suffering from a crippling mental illness and crucially has an imprint of the Marker's design in his mind. He's tortured for the Marker plans, yet suffering from dementia and hallucinations, Isaac is freed from the asylum by Frank DeLille, sent to release him, and this is where the game events begin.
So in terms of the game mechanics, you begin by selecting a difficulty from the main menu. There are 5 difficulty settings: casual, normal, survivalist, zealot, and hardcore. The hardcore mode is only unlocked once you've completed the game in any of the other difficulties. After an intro cutscene, you're thrown straight into the action, immediately trying to survive a wave of enemies without a weapon initially. Isaac quickly finds his feet and you begin to work your way through the 15 chapters which blend into one another quite seamlessly, moving through various locations in the space station. The game generally involves finding your way through the space station, completing objectives and puzzles, killing necromorphs and trying to survive the waves of these alien-looking creatures. It's a jump scare a minute. It should be mentioned that ammo and health generally feel very scarce in this game, even on the easier difficulty settings. You collect more from killing necromorphs, and stamping on their bodies sometimes gets you more, but the rounds of ammo for the weapons are very small and you quickly run out again. So conserving ammo and health where possible is key in this game. Weapons, ammo and health can be purchased from the in-game shops, which are kind of like futuristic wardrobes with a digital screen in your face. You can also buy upgraded suits that have bonuses attached, such as improved weapon damage for particular weapons or increased health. There are also benches where you can upgrade your weapons and suit. You can find and collect nodes as you go through the levels that are used to upgrade your weapons and suit at the benches. You also find video and audio logs which can be played to gain backstory information.
The game also has a multiplayer mode which has elements of the single-player campaign incorporated.
So in terms of the UI, well, there is basically no UI in this. It's not the type of game where you have a mini map or anything, and so very little is needed on the screen, as you can see any items in your inventory by going into the separate inventory screen.
Yeah, so as Dale's pointed out, the UI is non-existent, and required items such as health are incorporated into Isaac's suit, along with the amount of ammo being shown as a projection next to the weapon itself. I do like this as it creates a completely clear screen view with no clutter. So in terms of sound and music, the environment sounds excellent and really adds to the suspense. There are constant clangs and bangs keeping you on edge and really gives the horror feel to the game. The weapon sounds good and nothing noticeably bad, but then not amazing either, just middle of the road in my opinion. The voice acting was really good though, very authentic and really convincing.
What do you want, Isaac?
I'm trying to get to the transport hub. I need to get to the government sector.
What do you think we were trying to do?
Hey, I can help you. Besides, we got a better chance if we stick together. Don't you agree?
It's not a chance, Isaac. Other people are just a liability. I'll release the door lock. But after that, you're on your own. And please, don't follow me, okay?
Wait.
The music, like the environment sounds, is also very good, and it's only noticeable in places and it's fairly low key, but when it comes in it really builds and adds to the suspense.
Yeah, I did find there was very atmospheric game sounds in this. Lots of creaking pipes and noises to catch you off guard and think something's there. I thought the weapon sounds were good, and the alien sounds themselves were great, I thought, and suitably creepy. There were times when there's just a barrage of noise and the aliens all screaming and running at you, and it really gets your adrenaline going. Or it will make you cry in the corner if you don't like these kind of games. The voice acting I thought was great, and don't have anything negative to say about that at all.
So in terms of bugs and glitches, Dale, did you find any in this?
Well, early on there was some significant stuttering issues at times, but these did go away after a while, so I'm not sure if just my PC crapping out maybe. We've had some very hot weather here in the UK over the last few weeks, and it might have just been hammering my PC. The stuttering was most obvious when saving, and it basically just locked up completely for like 30 seconds, as you can see from this clip.
One bug I found was when carrying something with telekinesis, sometimes it would just suddenly vanish, as can be seen in this clip.
So to sum up, things I liked about the game. Well, the action sequences are really intense, really get you pumped. It was really great in that regard. Even though there are many cutscenes throughout the game, they're very well done and don't take too much control away from you. The claustrophobic and atmospheric feelings of some of the levels was great, like crawling through tight spaces when you just don't know what's coming up next. I thought the amount of different enemy types was impressive and all very well thought through with all different strengths and weaknesses. There was a good range of weapons and plenty of upgrade paths to tailor the game just to your liking. I thought the boss fights were cool. There weren't that many of these, there were few and far between, but when you did come across them, I thought they were well done.
I found it's a really good story to the game, clearly well thought out and executed very well to create a very cinematic game. You're thrown straight into the action with no tutorial and barely any hints to controls. You're kind of left to fend for yourself from the outset. This may annoy some people who want to get a grip with things before any intense action happens, but I actually quite like this. I found it to be more effective and realistic, especially considering it's a survival game. It's incredibly intense. You know the enemies are going to jump out and make you shit your pants. You're constantly on edge. It really has a varied range of enemies, as Dale pointed out. I think there must be about 15 different enemy types and a number of bosses, all of which have varying attacks, weaknesses, best ways of killing, and to be honest, they're all fucking bastards. There are really some difficult enemies in this game that make it really good, but also you find yourself frequently finishing a wave of enemies with fuck all health and ammo and just saying fucking bastards. a good range of base weapons with alternative fire options, although it should be noted you can only carry 4 weapons. Each available weapon is very different to each other, and there are also weapon subtypes that have added bonuses similar to the varying suits. I really like the non-existent UI and the way that the health stasis meter are shown on the back of the suit, with ammo projection floating next to the weapon itself. This was a really great way of avoiding a cluttered UI overlay and having a clean screen.
So in terms of things I didn't like, well, firstly, I'm not a fan of the over-the-shoulder camera angle, and I was quite disappointed when I realised that what they were using early on. And it was actually more frustrating as the game went on. Sometimes with the overlay from your inventory, for example, your head literally ended up in the way and you have to rotate the camera around to get it in the right place. I really feel the game would have been a lot better with just a normal camera angle, as I don't think this angle added anything to the horror elements, and it certainly didn't add anything to the gunplay. I find it so frustrating that the game tries to get you to sign up to an EA account every time you open the game, or at least the Steam version does. I'm not even sure the sign-up procedure would even work, as the game is over 10 years old. The end game really dragged things out far too much for me. I really just wanted it to end, and then there was like 2 more chapters to go through. I just felt a bit deflated by the time the credits rolled, and was just happy to have finished it. I found I could only play in short bursts really, as the constant jump scares just got annoying and frankly quite old after a while. It is effective to some extent, but it starts to weigh you down after a while. I did find you basically become immune to these jump scares and just run straight into things expecting something to jump out after a while. But it did mean the game felt a hell of a lot longer than the 10 hours or so it took me to complete it.
Yeah, so again, I'm really not a fan of the over-the-shoulder third-person viewing games. I know I've mentioned this before, and obviously Dale's just mentioned it as well, but I just don't like the view, especially for shooting games, as you're kind of shooting at an angle and it just all feels wrong to me. I think this is the most apparent in cutscenes, where it just feels like you're watching the protagonist rather than actually being them in the game.
One shred, one light, one bright started quantum in this universe. You forcing the life out of you because you can't get over the fact that I'm dead. You're responsible.
As a horror, this would have been far more shit scary in first person. There are constant jump scares in the game, with enemies jumping out from everywhere. But as the game went on, as Dale pointed out as well, it just becomes a bit too old and a bit too predictable. It was kind of like, oh, there's one of those hatches up ahead. They always come out of one of those, and 90% of the time they would do. The save point, shop and bench locations felt very random. In some places they were too close together, i.e. you'd come across a save point and then just a few rooms later you'd find another, but then other times you'd go for ages without any save points. Likewise with the shop locations, this did get quite frustrating at points. As the ammo and health are generally scarce in the game, I found due to the shop location proximity, sometimes I'd be fully stocked when the shop locations were close together, and then other times where the shops were further apart, I'd be running on empty, surrounded by enemies thinking, where the fuck is some ammo or health? I get this makes it more of a challenge, but it also did make it frustrating at times. The ending of the game, mainly the last chapter, felt like it was really dragged out. No spoilers, but it feels like you completed it at multiple points and then it seems to just keep going, and this got a bit much by this point. So in terms of missed opportunities, Dale, do you think there's any in this?
Well, one thing I feel they could have improved on was the melee aspect. As it is, you can only do a kind of swinging movement with the gun in your hand, and it kind of, I guess, like elbows the enemy. But it would have been good to have a range of different handheld weapons for when they get up close, which does happen quite a lot in this game.
I was just thinking it was a missed opportunity not making it a first-person shooter, or at least having the option to go into a first-person view. I think the bench upgrades for the weapons could have been better. They were just the same stats for all, such as damage, ammo capacity and reload time. I think it would have been nice to see this expanded to include different types of ammo and weapon expansions, plus proper modification, not just adding a node to a computer screen. I think dual wielding of some weapons would have been awesome to take out the necromorph scum.
So in terms of scores, well, having now had a few days to reflect on the game, I do feel it was good overall and would recommend playing it, but unfortunately the frustrations I found would probably stop me from wanting to play it again, and so left a fairly average impression on me overall. I feel the camera angle and over-the-top use of jump scares really didn't do it for me, and the dragged-out ending really started to wind me up after a while. That being said, the general atmosphere and interesting story did help bring it back for me, and so it's definitely worth a 7 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, so for me, on reflection, this game was really, really good. It had a very good blend of survival and violently gruesome graphic horror with a compelling, intense story behind it and a wide range of bastard enemy types and brutally hard difficulty, even on normal mode. However, there are some bits that I felt really dropped this down from being a top-notch game for me. These include the over-the-shoulder third-person view, when it really would have been far better in first-person, seemingly random save point and shop locations, and a dragged-out ending chapter and sequence. Overall, I'm giving Dead Space 2 still a fairly high score of 8 out of 10. So we'd usually go into our outro bit here, but I just wanted to mention a few more points generally about Dead Space game series and the state of the gaming industry. So Dead Space and Dead Space 2 are considered very highly rated games by critics and fans alike, and rightly so. But according to Electronic Arts, Dead Space 2 was a commercial failure. It closely matched the first game in sales but cost much more to make, so they see it as a failure. To try and combat this for Dead Space 3, Electronic Arts, thinking they were following gaming trends, in inverted commas, pushed Visceral Games to move away from the survival horror and to be more action orientated. They added cooperative multiplayer and, worst of all, added microtransactions. Dead Space 3 then released to low sales and ultimately resulted in EA cancelling the series, even though there were further games in the pipeline. Sorry, I'm going to rant here, but when will publishers listen properly to gamers and stop trying to follow what they think are gaming trends and end up ruining games and game series with bullshit greedy moves like microtransactions? Gamers deserve more than being ripped off by that utter shit. The developers are getting greedy and gamers are paying the price by getting the unpolished games, with most of the content coming in the form of expensive DLCs and microtransactions on top of an overpriced, unfinished game. Following how good Dead Space 2 was, the fact that the fans turned their back on Dead Space 3 to result in lower sales due to the change in direction forced by Electronic Arts just goes to show the sentiment among real gamers towards publishers' so-called trends and the bullshit that is microtransaction. I swear if they'd stuck to the Dead Space 2 format with Dead Space 3, spoken to and listened to fans about how they can improve on the series in the third game, and the series would have had more success. As it turns out, the first Dead Space game is actually being remade, due for release in early 2023. However, with the change in developer, I'm not holding out much hope for it. Now that Visceral Games is no longer, it's being remade by Motive Studios. Star Wars Squadrons, link to our review of that is in the description. Need I say any more?
Well guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.